Welcome to Booked, the bookstore education podcast brought to you by the American Booksellers Association. This episode is part of our Indies Introduced series, where we spotlight debut authors handpicked by booksellers from around the country. In each episode, a bookseller from the Indies Introduced panel will interview the author of a debut title featured in our program.
Hi, my name is Ashli Byfield from Greenlight Bookstore in Brooklyn, New York. I am here with TC Kemper, author of the Ginghams, one of this year's Summer-Fall 2026 Indies Introduced picks. TC Kemper is an American author of sparky, kidlit, and speculative fiction. When she's not sipping peppermint tea sweetened with local honey or hiking woodland trails with her family and rescue pup, she's likely lost in a beautifully crafted story, and The Ginghams is her debut novel. Welcome, TC. I'm so excited to talk to you today.
Thanks, Ashley. I'm so excited to chat too.
Yes, I'm very excited to get into the Ginghams. I think this was one of the first books I read for Indies Introduced, and it was probably the first book that really hooked me. And I was like, this has definitely got to make it through the entire process. As someone who's like very into like fantasy, I love when I can read a realistic fiction book that like really hooks me because that just means that there's something special there, particularly for me. So I think that this book was great at like perfectly balancing like eerie with adventure. And I think in spite of like the very real difficulties that the kids are facing, in the end delivers a story of hope, which I think is just very important. And so for the kid reader that I think that this would appeal to, I think that this is great for readers who love realistic fiction with a little bit of mystery. I think this is great for queer kids, kids who are navigating friendships, new and old, and just someone looking for something fresh. I really think that this has like a wide scope.
Thank you, Ashley. I love to hear that.
But yeah, I think in terms of questions, I want to start with the title of the book, and I want to get into it's called The Ginghams, of course, which, is a prince. I was thinking about it, and we're just fashion shows up in the book in like a smaller way, but especially when you're young, I think it's a great tool for exploring individuality and self-expression. And I think we see a lot of characters in the books doing that, especially like Tyler with how he expresses himself, and May with her hair, and just the way that the characters in the book are dressed and how that changes is such at a forefront of it. And I think but of course, we also see in the book that it can also be used to quiet the individual and like be used as a tool of oppression. And so I am very curious, why did you choose to pair Gingham and the that print with the idea of perfection and conformity in this
Yeah.
story?
So gingham is a very small, boxy checked pattern, and it gives a retro vintage vibe. And I thought for a book that is tailored after the Stepford Wives, what is a more perfect visual than a fabric that is literally made of boxes when the story is about someone forcing people into their own version of a box? They want to box people in, they want to make them behave and speak and look and read a certain way. So gingham as a pattern not only gives kind of the old school, type of visual, but also it kind of has the symbolic nature to it too. The Gingham family comes in and they want to control everything. They want to tell you exactly who you should be and how you should look and how you should behave. And I think that for such a neat, tidy type of print, I think that really evokes what the Gingham family was going for when they came in and decided to take over the town.
Okay, yeah, no, that makes sense. I was thinking about it because I was like, this is such I think their ideology, the Ginghams, is like trying to create like more traditional gender roles.
Mm-hmm.
I think adds to what I was saying earlier about this book feeling fresh, because I feel like that was a fresh take on how to convey this like forced traditional gender role. Okay, so then in the book, I think to serve the agenda of the pillars of perfection, other books become banned and they're removed from the school library, and including the children's favorite comic, The Twister Trio. And I think so many kids today, like they find their in with reading through comics, and yet there is like a stigma amongst other readers about whether or not that is like considered a real book. And I think it's interesting to see comics so at the like forefront in your book that is what someone might say is like more of a traditional book. So I think what, in your opinion, is the value of comic books and graphic novels to a child's experience of or relationship with reading, and what can be differ and accomplish that a traditional book could not. So they're a little bit of a two-parter.
Yeah. So one thing I know about comic book readers is that they tend to be some of the most passionate, the most sometimes rabid consumers of the things that they love. If you have someone who's a comic book fan, they're going to be a comic book mega fan. I see that a lot in the people in my life that are really big comic book readers. But I think it's more than that too. I think that comic books and graphic novels offer not only the story appeal, but also the visual appeal. People have different learning styles. Some people are definitely more visual learners. And having something like a comic book or a graphic novel that provides both the visual aspect as well as the narrative is something that can serve as a really great way to make someone a lifelong reader. Sometimes you have reluctant readers that maybe are intimidated by picking up a book that's just nothing but words for 250 pages, but they'll pick up a 300-page graphic novel because it has the visuals in it to go along with the storytelling. And we're in a place where our country has a literacy crisis. So anything that we can do to appeal to young readers and foster that love of reading, no matter what form it is something that ultimately benefits everybody. And I will actually share too, one of my favorite graphic novels that I read when I was young. I'll never forget it. It was fourth grade. And they used to do a book cart for your birthday. So they would bring around a book cart, and for your birthday, you got to pick any book you wanted off that book cart. And the book that I chose was a Shakespeare, the complete works of William Shakespeare graphic novel. Like it was all comics form, all visuals with the little speech bubbles and little illustrated, Hamlet and Romeo and Juliet. And they had The Tempest, Midsummer Night's Dream. And so imagine a fourth grader getting totally enamored with William Shakespeare because of that particular book. And it really was something that started my love of Shakespeare. And there's Shakespeare references, of course, in the Ginghams. Right off in chapter 1, Midsummer Night's Dream is mentioned. So there is a lot of value, and there can be really surprising avenues that can lead a reader into other interests in that format too.
I wanted to also, sticking with like themes of in middle grade books. I think another common theme of middle grade books that you look the circles that in middle grade fiction, the adults in the stories are often ignorant or dismissive of the issue that the kids are dealing with, or and ignorant in the way that I mean, like they might not even know that's going on. Um, and I think it's quite reflective, I think, of the reader who is at that age, at this middle grade age, usually navigating for the first time, figuring out their own autonomy versus listening to their parents' guidance. I think that's why that is such like a theme in middle grade books, and we see it in yours as well. And so I was just curious, as an adult yourself, how did you navigate giving your young protagonist agency and autonomy in the Ginghams?
Yeah. So Joni immediately has a fish out of water feeling when she steps off the camp bus and she comes home to this town that she thought she knew, her neighborhood that she thought she could trust, to be the exact same as when she left it. And of course, it's not that. She comes home and her best friend is changing and her neighborhood's changing and everyone's suddenly wearing ginghams and the gingham and the ice cream shop is, serving vanilla and people are wearing pearl earrings out of nowhere. And it's very disorienting to her. And one of my favorite tropes in any, kids book is when the adults aren't the ones that swoop in and save the day, because personally, I think that makes for a pretty boring story. If it's like, oh, there's a problem, an adult immediately fixes it, the end. So Joni taking that initiative and going, this is wrong. Something that I love has been taken from me and warped. And I'm not going to take that lying down. I'm going to do something about it. And so when Joni and her friend Tyler go toe to toe with this powerful, influential family, I think that that's a really important thing because it shows kids that it's okay. And in fact, it's encouraged to question authority if you feel like something's wrong, or it's okay to call out, powerful people, even if, you might be intimidated by them, or if they look really polished or friendly or correct in some way. If you feel that it's wrong, say something. And I, as an adult, feel like because I write for children, that I have to look through the lens of what I would have wanted to read when I was a middle school or elementary age, reader. I would have wanted to read a book that would show me what I can be, and what power I hold. Because sometimes being a kid, it can feel a little powerless at moments. You have authority figures all around you at school and at home and in your community that are telling you everything that you should be or should look, or how you should, speak or behave. And so I hope that the Ginghams, through Joni's autonomy and her willingness to take a risk and stand up for what's right, is something that shows kids that, hey, if something doesn't feel right to me, I shouldn't stay silent about it. Yeah.
I think this book is teeming with like great conversation starters and is a catalyst for a lot of big and topical ideas that are seen in the world today. And I just want to give the kids who read your book a place to go next to continue the conversations that are present in this book, in the Ginghams. So if you were building a curriculum or reading list for a young child, ages 10 to 12, on the ideas presented in this book, what media, and this can be films, shows, or other books, other forms of literature, would you curate? Knowing that, of course, the Ginghams is at the top of the list.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would encourage, if I were to create a curriculum, I would probably encourage readers to take a look at books like Ban This Book, any books that have to deal with censorship, book banning. Book banning is obviously a very strong theme in the Ginghams because
Yes.
the Gingham family cares a lot about what you read and what you don't read. I would also say, stories that have to do with utopian versus dystopian societies, things like The Giver by Lois Lowry could be a good choice there. In nonfiction, literal news headlines. Unfortunately, we're in a place where book banning is constantly being spoken about, pushed. There's legislative action being taken. So maybe even discussions about what's happening currently. What does book banning mean? What does censorship mean? What does that look like? How do you identify censorship? Because censorship is not just censorship of self, but also literal media, and we're seeing it unfortunately increase right now. In a little bit more of a fun addition, I would say if I were to pick a film, I would pick WALL-E. So because that WALL-E has a message, while it's very climate oriented, it also is, an illustration of what does society look like when someone uses technology to drive how people behave, because it is very much tech centric. We see how humans who have left Earth behave and change and look and act when they are constantly fed, someone's curated technological messaging. So I would say that there's relevance too in the movie WALL-E that could connect to some of the overarching themes in the Ginghams. Not to give away that there's a tech element, but
No,
spoiler alert.
No, I think that was a great summary or like little tease at all the different themes, because I think, yes, like I said, like your book touches on some very real world difficulties that we can see if we just look at the news, but also is balancing it with like some like adventure, some eeriness, some mystery.
Yeah.
So that was a great list, and it makes me want to rewatch Wally. We need to make like a modern day Wally. We need to return to that story.
Yes.
Okay, and
Wally's
then
great.
exactly. And then lastly, which I mentioned it earlier, but I want to give some more context about what is the Pillars of Perfection, if that's not too much of a spoiler, but it is. We've talked a little bit about book banning, and it's the book that the Ginghams use called The Pillars of Perfection to spearhead their agenda in the town and help like take over, and they're given these like pillars, these ideals that they think is like how you get to being perfect and being the perfect family unit. So I wanted to ask you if there is one lesson or true quote unquote pillar on the idea of perfection that the reader should take away from this book. What should it be?
Yeah. So Mr. Gingham's pillars of perfection, the Gingham family's pillars of perfection, are all about creating a sense of what they think perfect is. And it's ultimately a propaganda tool. It's a tool of control. And so I would go completely opposite with my pillar. I think that my reminder or pillar of, imperfection is that perfect is a made up concept. No one is perfect. And even those that think that they understand what perfect means should be reminded that perfect, and I'm putting air quotes, is something that is subjective and means different things to different people. So I will go back to and say my pillar is that no one is perfect and perfect is made up. So quit, holding yourself to that standard. It's fake. And what makes us imperfect is what makes us special. And that should be celebrated all the way around.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, well, those were my questions, and I think you had beautiful, wonderful answers.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. If there's any last things you want to say, but if not,
No, I'm so excited that my debut, The Ginghams, is on bookshelves. And I just want to say thank you so much again to the American Booksellers Association, to the committees that chose this story for both the Indies Introduce honor and as the Indies Kids Next honor, because I am so honored, so flattered, so blown away to have this little story, which is a twist for middle grade on the Stepford Wives, receive this kind of recognition from booksellers, because I think that independent booksellers are absolute heroes.
I love that. No, I think this is exactly the book that should be on the shelves. It just makes sense to me. So I'm so happy for it, and I'm so happy for you. Thank you so much. Goodbye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Booked, the bookstore education podcast brought to you by the American Booksellers Association. Don't forget to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast app. Additional educational resources can always be found on the ABA site at www.bookweb.org. Happy reading!